Konnichiwa. Mugen Gumi e yokoso. Welcome to Mugen Gumi. This will be our fourth installment, and at this point we've learned all the moves for all the pieces, and ending with the knight, the lancer, and the pawn. The important things to remember about the knight is it moves like the chess knight, except only in the forward sense. So 2 steps forward and then hook either left or right, and that is it. And that imposes a practical limit to how far across the board the knight can move. The lancer moves forward an indefinite number of squares until it encounters a friendly piece or an enemy piece, in which case it either stops short or, in the case of an enemy piece, may take. Both of them are eligible for promotion once they cross the 7th rank from where they started, but need not necessarily promote, but they absolutely must promote when they reach the 9th rank, the final rank, as they have no valid move after that. The pawn moves forward just as in the case of the chess pawn, except that it only moves forward 1 square at a time. So unlike chess, there is not the possibility of making a double move for the first move. In addition, the pawn only takes forward and not diagonally. The pawn must promote upon crossing the 7th rank, and there's no advantage to not doing so in any case. So this session, what I'd like to discuss is setting up the board, and then the opening moves for the Bogin opening. And what I'll show is how to do the Bogin opening, as well as how to defend against it. Okay, so this is what the setup looks like. You'll notice all the pawns are on the 3rd rank. So a little in advance of where they would be in chess, but there are good reasons for this. You'll also note that the setup is not mirror image. The rook or kyousha is always to the player's right. Kaku, or the bishop, is always to the player's left. Everything else, one of the things you notice is there's just Osama by himself, the emperor. There is no queen. There's an odd number of spaces either way, so you don't have the descriptive setup of king's rook pawn to king's rook pawn 4, for example, or queen's bishop pawn to queen's bishop pawn 4. You don't have those descriptors in this case, and I'll get into the notation for shogi later. Point is, you have an uneven number of spaces, so and only 1 royal, so that's that. The golds flank the emperor, so keen flanks on either side, and just outside of them, or Gin, you have the knight in their accustomed place, and you have the lancers sitting where a rook would sit in chess. Purpose for having the pawns up here is, again, there is no set ability to castle as there would be in chess. It doesn't exist, and they're out of line anyway. So in order to be able to castle effectively and retain your pawn front wall, you're able to maneuver your king, either do this and maneuver your king across, or move him up front. Not necessarily a good idea, but at least it's an option that's available to you. And so that way you can eventually maneuver him into somewhere very close to the corner. And so that's set up as a matter of convenience or practicality. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go through several moves of the Bogin opening, fairly standard opening. There are 2 broad classifications of openings, one being a static rook opening and the other being a mobile rook opening. And so we'll start with Bogin, which is a static rook opening. And what that means is that the rook basically does remain somewhere in its general starting position for perhaps the first third of the game, maybe more, depends on the development. And it's a simpler game to understand. Once you start moving the rook around and moving some of the other pieces around in order to make that work effectively, it does get a little bit complicated. So mobile rook openings will be treated somewhat later. So a good first move. Oh, again, from my position, I'm playing black. Black's the one that begins the game. Is the first move. White is basically defending. So reverse order of chess. Just different convention. So typical opening is this, and white would reciprocate. And what this does is this starts developing the file in which your rook or kyousha is situated. For the time being, you know, the only freedom that the rook has is within this one rank here. So not very useful, certainly from an offensive perspective right now. And so this is buying a little bit of maneuver space. So the next move would be this. And you'll notice that's the center of the board now on both sides. Okay, typically then you start working on your defense as well. And so moving Kin from where he starts to a position next to the bishop is, or kaku, is usually a common move. And so that's going to reciprocate over here as well. Okay, and what this does is, you know, Kaku's already got this piece, this pawn covered, and this pawn covered, and they're also both covered by the knight, and this one's also covered by the lance. What this does is double covers this, provides single coverage here, and provides new coverage for that pawn. So you know, that strengthens the defenses considerably. All right. So now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and move this pawn here. It's the first challenging move here, offering combat. And the predictable thing would be to do this. And so that's a pawn captured. That's what happens there. And then, guess what? You can do that. In which case, you withdraw your rook to save him, because that's not even a trade there. Okay, now that you've moved, the same thing's going to happen over here. And we're back to where we started. But what we have achieved is this file's open up to this point. So it gives you a point of attack. Same can be said, the same can be said on this side. So everything's perfectly symmetrical. Okay, so what to do? Well, this is where we start the attack. And so the first move, I said it's Bogin, so that means climbing silver. Bol referring to a pole or a rod, and then gin being silver. So silver is going to start climbing. So that's the only way you can move and close with the gap that's here. Okay, so white opens that way. What this does now is opens the diagonal for his bishop or kaku, which can be very useful. Okay. Ging moves forward again. White moves his game. And what you see is this is the setup for the defense against Bogin, because you already have gold here providing support in front of the bishop or kaku. What we're about to do is reinforce that support up here. Okay. Okay, continuing climb. Okay, and so what you see now is this point here, this point on the board has become very strong defensively. And advancing this, even though supported by the rook, is becoming less and less attractive of a proposition. We're going to go ahead and advance anyway. Okay, so white's basically now just waiting for something to happen and waiting to see if black's really going to press the attack home on this side. And so basically being completely set up now, the silver is already supported by the knight here, already plenty strong here. You got enough going here, so that's not a bad move to make. This provides some better cover now that this one gold or king has moved away from the emperor. This provides some protection for the emperor, covers all the pawns in the front, and gets him into a position to provide support here if necessary. Okay. Ordinarily, yes. So ordinarily, if you still had the possibility of getting away with it, which you don't, clearly don't. Ordinarily, at this point, this would be the play. And what it drives is an exchange of pawns, puts the silver up here, supported by the rook, and forces an exchange for either the gold or the bishop. Since there's an overwhelming force here, black would have to marshal additional forces in order to punch through here. Black's going to decline going forward, and is going to instead open the bishop's diagonal. What this offers is the possibility of exchanging bishops. That's fairly common in game openings, and that introduces a lot of possibilities and can make for a scary start to a game, because kaku, or the bishop, is an incredible amount of power to be able to drop onto the board somewhat willy-nilly, as you've already seen. So it does make for a wild game, conceivably. And rook exchanges are also make for very interesting games. So the alternative would have been to drop the pawn, exchange. What probably would happen is you'd exchange silvers. At this point in time, exchanging silvers, even though materially the same, so many moves have already been invested into putting the silver here, and the further development that's occurred on white side of the board really puts white in at an advantage, despite the fact that you do have more or less material parity. Okay. Well, I hope you found that enjoyable and informative. It's a very common opening, Bogin. At least elements of it are very common. You almost invariably want to open up your rook file to the extent it's possible. At some point, you do want to open up the diagonal for your bishop, or kaku. So these are common threads throughout all of the openings, really. In any case, if you like what I'm doing here, please hit the like button. If you're interested in following this any further, by all means hit the subscribe button, and I am always interested in receiving comments and advice and anything else that might be helpful to this overall project. Well, till next time. Mata jikai.